what's going on with Bitcoin is evolving faster than a society can digest it. I think you could say this is all consistent. Bitcoin was misunderstood in the year 2011. It was misunderstood by me in the year 2013. It was misunderstood again in 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021. When we first got into the space in 2020, there were people that misunderstood it, and we had a lot of massive amount of criticism.
Bitcoin's story has always been one of underestimation. Time and again, it's been dismissed as a fad, a bubble, or a tech experiment doomed to fail. Yet here we are, Bitcoin trading above $120,000, commanding a $2.4 trillion market cap, and forcing even its loudest critics to pay attention. What's happening now, according to Michael Saylor, isn't just another price rally. It's the beginning of something much deeper, and his prediction might surprise you. In a recent interview with Bitcoin Magazine, Saylor, the co-founder of MicroStrategy and one of Bitcoin's most vocal evangelists, peeled back the layers of what he sees unfolding next. He argues that Bitcoin isn't just appreciating in price, it's evolving as a living network, maturing faster than most can comprehend. From 2011 to 2015, even many so-called experts failed to grasp what they were witnessing. They saw volatility and speculation, not the early stages of a new monetary standard. Now, in 2025, Saylor believes the same misunderstanding persists, but on a much larger scale. While retail traders chase headlines and short-term profits, the real movement, he says, is happening quietly behind the scenes. Institutions, corporations, and governments are gradually integrating Bitcoin into their balance sheets, reserves, and financial systems. This isn't hype, it's infrastructure. Saylor highlighted what he calls the adoption paradox. Every time Bitcoin stabilizes, critics declare it boring or stagnant. Yet that very stability is what gives institutions the confidence to step in. The more predictable Bitcoin becomes, the larger the players it attracts, and each new wave of adoption strengthens the base for the next explosive move. So while everyone's asking whether Bitcoin will hit $150,000 or crash to $80,000, Saylor's thinking several moves ahead. For him, the real story isn't about the next number, it's about the next layer of adoption. Because once the world finally catches up to what Bitcoin truly represents, today's price debates will look as outdated as the doubts of 2013. Stay tuned as we bring you more clips from Michael Saylor's interview to gain more insight. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for additional in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the rest of the video.
Bitcoin is hope because Bitcoin represents digital energy. It represents energy in cyberspace. It represents digital property, digital capital, digital gold. But in its most profound setting, it means digital energy, a way to convey energy through time, through space, that is life-affirming for 8 billion people, for 400 million corporations, for millions and millions of institutions, for hundreds of countries, for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of municipalities. And if I were to say fire is hope, and you were shivering and freezing to death, you would get it. And if I were to say electricity is hope, and you were in New York City trapped on the 98th floor of a skyscraper or trying to get up to the 98th floor of a skyscraper, you would get it. And now when I say Bitcoin is hope, I mean Bitcoin is digital energy. And if you want to send energy at the speed of light from here to halfway around the earth to save the life or solve the problem of another human being or corporation, you're going to need digital energy. And so it represents the next paradigm shift, the next manifestation in the story of energy and the story of human beings harnessing energy in order to improve the quality of their lives. Well, I think we're really talking about the integration of digital energy into the civilization. So, what do you want to see? Well, let's start with the basic application of digital energy as capital, digital capital. There's a trend right now for publicly traded companies to recapitalize on Bitcoin. Our company was the first in 2020. Then there were 2 or 3, and then there were 10, and then there were 20, then there were 40. And about a year ago, there were 60. And then about 3 months ago, there were 120. And right now, there's more than 180. And I would expect that one way you know that the world is adopting Bitcoin is we go from 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000. You know, as some people have said, one day every company will be a Bitcoin treasury company. So recapitalizing companies on Bitcoin is one measure of adoption. I think another measure of adoption is building support for Bitcoin into software applications. So, right now you have applications that run on iPhones or Android phones like Cash App that have Bitcoin in them. You have wallets that support Bitcoin, but I look forward to the day when Apple builds it into the iPhone, when Google builds it into the Android operating system, when Microsoft builds it into the Microsoft operating systems. And it's either integral to the operating system of every consumer device, or it's integral to the hardware itself, and people start to integrate Bitcoin support into all the hardware devices that propagate throughout the world. And I think that'll be another really, really big sign. What's going on with Bitcoin is evolving faster than a society can digest it. And so I think you could say this is all consistent. Bitcoin was misunderstood in the year 2011. It was misunderstood by me in the year 2013. It was misunderstood again in 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021. When we first got into the space in 2020, there were people that misunderstood it, and we had massive amount of criticism when our stock was $10 a share. When our stock went to $100 a share, it was massive amount of criticism again. When it crashed to $20 a share, there was still massive criticism. When we had $2 billion of Bitcoin, people were cackling, or $1 billion, saying, oh, you lost $1 billion on this. When we made $100 billion, everybody disappeared and slunk into the shadows. And then a new set of trolls, a new set of critics came out when our market cap went above 100 billion. It's a different set of cynics, a different set of critics, a different set of misconceptions. I think you're going to see the ebb and flow of that set of misconceptions and that anxiety. It'll continue when Bitcoin is 100,000. It'll continue when Bitcoin is 1 million. It'll continue when Bitcoin is 10 million. It'll continue when Bitcoin goes to 20 million. And there's always going to be a new narrative of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It'll be a different generation. You know, the people that used to laugh and say, oh yeah, you lost $1 billion trading in Bitcoin, they're gone. They disappeared, right? There'll be a new generation of people that say, do you think it makes sense to buy Bitcoin at $1 million a coin? It's going to trade down to 500,000, right? And then there'll be a set of people that will say, you're buying it at 10 million a coin, it's going to trade to 6 million, you moron, you lost so much money. This is how societies deal with new ideas. If you study paradigm shifts, how long did it take to embrace electricity? How long did people thought John D. Rockefeller was crazy for 30 years until he was the richest man in the world. Mm-hmm. And then and at the point that he was the richest man in the world, people thought, well, that trade is done. And that was just when they invented the automobile and he got 10 times richer. Right. And so the society doesn't really deal with paradigm shifts that well in near term, but after 30, 40, 50 years, you look back and you say, well, of course we should have embraced the fire, the electricity, the wheel, the crude oil, the nuclear, even nuclear power right now, for example. nuclear power has only become cool or useful in the last 2 years. Okay, so for 50 years, people thought nuclear power was an awful thing, and all of a sudden they woke up and they realized that I guess we need nuclear energy to power the AI data centers to make us super intelligent, and if we don't turn it on, we're going to be slow and stupid. So, if it took them 50 years, by the way, nuclear power is like unlimited, clean, free energy, and they had to fight for 60 years to get people to embrace the idea of unlimited clean energy. It doesn't surprise me that there'll be skeptics about digital energy. They won't get it.
Bitcoin can be seen as a form of digital energy, representing value and power in the digital world. It acts like digital property or digital gold, but more deeply, it serves as a way to transfer energy instantly across the globe, benefiting billions of people. Bitcoin symbolizes digital energy that can support many human and business needs through fast transactions. One major sign of Bitcoin's growing acceptance is how more companies are holding it as part of their capital. From a few businesses in 2020, now over 180 public companies have added Bitcoin to their balance sheets. This trend shows companies view Bitcoin as a valuable asset. Another indicator is the increasing integration of Bitcoin into everyday technology. Despite the growth, Bitcoin has faced ongoing skepticism and criticism, much like new technologies before it. Critics often change their arguments as Bitcoin's value rises. This cycle of doubt is common whenever a big change challenges the status quo, similar to how it took society decades to embrace electricity or nuclear power. Bitcoin represents the next shift, part of humanity's ongoing story of using energy to improve life. Let's watch more clips from the interview.
So Bitcoin, it represents the bearer instrument, but it really is practical for an individual to take custody, and it's practical for a company to take custody. And of course, I guess what I counsel to people that are idealists is they don't trust banks and they don't trust companies. But the point that I would make is during the entire gold era, gold was so difficult to handle that no company could custody their gold and no bank could. If we lived in a world where 40,000 banks were custodians of Bitcoin, you would have evolved from a world where there were like 8 or 6 custodians of Bitcoin custodians of gold in the entire world, right? And so I think that Bitcoin offers a promise of economic integrity. I don't think we should rail against a bank embracing Bitcoin.
No.
The truth of the matter is, if every country on earth embraced Bitcoin and the countries became the custodians of Bitcoin, and the only thing we accomplished was to have 150 countries custody Bitcoin, that would be more decentralized than the gold standard for hundreds of years, right? It would be an order of magnitude more decentralized than we had under the gold standard. So what we're talking about is a world where if only banks and only governments custody Bitcoin, you would be 100x to 1,000x more decentralized. And if corporations in custody Bitcoin, you would be 10,000 times more decentralized. And of course, in a world where millions of individuals or tens or hundreds of millions of individuals self-custody, you're not like 1, 2, 3, 4 orders of magnitude more decentralized. You're like 6, 7, 8 more orders of magnitude more decentralized. I think when the administration says they want to be a global Bitcoin superpower, they mean they want to encourage banks to bank Bitcoin. They want our banking system to embrace it, to extend loans against it, to offer, yield or credit against it. They want to enable transactions. They want Apple and Google and Meta and Microsoft to support Bitcoin. They want public companies to be able to buy Bitcoin. They want an explosion and expansion of institutional grade Bitcoin custodians. They want favorable tax laws for Bitcoin, favorable security laws for Bitcoin, and they want the finance companies in the United States, whether it's BlackRock or whether it's Coinbase or whether it's Strategy or whether it's Block, they want the finance companies in the United States to lead the way in digital assets and digital capital and Bitcoin adoption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. One of the criticisms is, through a humanitarian lens, if corporations hold a large share of the Bitcoin, what does that mean for the average person? How do you, avoid crowding out small users?
When we got involved, Bitcoin was trading $9,000 a coin. And today, Bitcoin's $115,000 a coin. And it got that way because our company bought 3%. And BlackRock enabled institutions to buy like 4%. And that means that 93% of the gain, and that's 93% of nearly $2 trillion. So $1.8 trillion went to the individuals that owned the Bitcoin before the corporations got involved. So the individual's not been crowded out. The individual just, if you posit that individuals, were the ones that owned the Bitcoin in the year 2020, then those individuals made $1.8 trillion since the corporations got involved. So the corporations aren't crowding out the individuals. The corporations are making the individuals that believed in Bitcoin insanely wealthy. And now the individuals can decide, what do they want to do with that economic power, right? And they'll do whatever. As a practical matter, it seems to me that for our company, if we were to ever get to 5% of the network's going to be at least $1 million a coin. If we were to go beyond it, it's going to 10 million a coin. So when we get to 7% of the network, if we do, and Bitcoin is $10 million a coin, and if BlackRock keeps up with us, that means 85% of the network, right? And you're going to be talking about $200 trillion. So you're going to have $170 trillion that will flow to the individuals. So they're not exactly getting crowded out, right? If anything, what you've got is the corporations are all engines turning the flywheel of the Bitcoin economy. Every single company, every Bitcoin treasury company that capitalizes on Bitcoin is like attaching a motor to the network. And every time that company buys $50 million worth of Bitcoin, they spin that drive shaft one turn. That's one day's natural supply, right? And so the more companies that come on, whether it's BlackRock or whether it's Strategy or whether it's Metaplanet or whether it's 21 or whether it's BSTR, or whether it's similar, whoever it might be, each one of them is firing up a motor. All of the motors are powering up the network. If you're an individual and you believe in Bitcoin, you buy the Bitcoin, you cold storage the Bitcoin, and you let all the companies power up the network. If the companies didn't show up and the network was all individuals, Bitcoin would be trading $5,000 a coin.
No.
And here's the problem. It wouldn't just trade at $5,000 a coin, but the corporations, if they were to choose a different network to power up, if all the companies went to Bitcoin Cash or Litecoin or Ethereum or something else, Bitcoin would max out at 5,000 a coin and it would dwindle down to nothing because the companies would latch on to the next network, and then they would go to every government in China and Russia and Europe and South America and Africa and the US, and all the laws would be modified to benefit the other network and eventually squeeze the Bitcoin network out. This is a protocol, and you could even say there's a protocol war, and it's a war to determine the future of money. The war for the future of money is going to be fought and won with money.
Michael Saylor explained that Bitcoin serves as a bearer instrument, practical for both individuals and companies to hold. He noted that while many idealists distrust banks and companies, historically, gold was so difficult to manage that no bank or company could fully custody it. He pointed out that if thousands of banks globally held Bitcoin, it would represent far greater decentralization than gold ever achieved. He emphasized that Bitcoin offers economic integrity, and having banks or governments as custodians would still be vastly more decentralized than past systems like the gold standard. The decentralization grows exponentially when corporations or millions of individuals take custody of Bitcoin. He also mentioned that when the administration talks about becoming a global Bitcoin superpower, their goal is to encourage banks to hold and transact in Bitcoin. This includes enabling loans, credit, and transactions based on Bitcoin, as well as integrating support from major tech companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. The expansion of institutional Bitcoin custody and favorable regulations were also key priorities to promote adoption. Addressing concerns about corporations holding large Bitcoin shares, Michael Saylor pointed out that when corporations started to invest, the majority of gains actually went to early individual holders. He explained that firms buying Bitcoin help power the entire network, driving its value up, which benefits individuals who already hold it. He warned that without corporate involvement, Bitcoin's price could stagnate, and the ecosystem might shift to competing digital networks if companies and governments backed alternatives. Saylor depicted this as a protocol war for the future of money, where money itself will be the tool to determine the winner. As we wrap up, what do you think is the biggest challenge for Bitcoin's continued growth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.